This Kirblog topic was suggested by Discellanius. If you'd like to suggest future topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear them before they officially release, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kirbifer. Talk to me, work with me, help me. Together we can collaborate. This Kirblog is a history of collaborating, and it's been real great. Welcome to my very first Patreon-suggested Kirblog topic. I'm very excited to be doing this, and thank you to everybody in just this first, little under a month of having my Patreon up. The support has been wonderful. Really, really appreciate it. And this is a great thing to talk about because, if anything, it's just going to be, however long this period will be of me showing my gratitude for the fact that I've had the fortunate situation for my whole, career of creating stuff on the internet that I've gotten to work with a lot of really, really awesome people, giving, creative, wonderful human beings that have lent me their support and that I've gotten to work together with in all sorts of different ways, everything from art and animation to music to, writing, production, to everything. It's been quite a ride, and I only hope that it continues to get better and better. I've continued to meet more and more amazingly talented people that have somehow lowered their standard enough to want to work with me on my stuff in the first place. But let's start from the very beginning, because since the very start of this, I could not have done anything that anybody knows me for at all, even the oldest of old school fans. I could not have done a single thing without the help of others, other artists and creators and just cool people that have, seen something in what I've been trying to do and have wanted to help. And so that goes all the way back to my first kind of major project, which of course was TV Tome Adventures. TTA for short, which of course hardcore Tome fans know was kind of the precursor to the Terrain of Magical Expertise series and video game that came, much later. This was in the early 2000s. This was back in, this must have been around 2003 or 4 when I decided to go ahead and try making a web series using sprite animation. I had just learned Flash, back when it was Macromedia Flash, and as well as a program called Fireworks. This was something I was using long before I had any access to Photoshop. I was using Fireworks to rip sprites and edit sprites as well. Of course, TTA was all done with pretty much pre-existing graphics of, and pre-existing material in general. I mean, the music was all licensed stuff from video games and other various sources, and the backgrounds were all recycled from other games. Some had some doctoring on them, and the sprites in particular were quite an undertaking because by that time I had learned and been involved with a few different communities that did sprite work. If any of you guys have not seen the interview that I did a few months ago with Daz, who is one of the founders of the Spriters resource, as well as Did You Know Gaming as well. This was a big thing for people back in the 2000s and even I believe 90s as well, was taking video game sprites and editing them to be made into other characters. Often it would be, fan Sonic, Mega Man, or Kirby characters and the like. Sometimes it would be completely original characters. And for the case of Tome, or for TTA rather, I should say, it was a bit of a combination of both because, of course, people know that once upon a time, my, humble avatar character that you see now, Kirbifer, was in fact a white Kirby with a Link hat and a little tuft of brown hair because, that's how it was back in the day when that's all I really knew how to do was edit sprites. So I mean, I knew how to draw, but I didn't have access to the tools that I had now. I didn't know how to really traditionally animate yet, and it just wasn't in the cards. So all that said, I went to a community. This was on a forum called the Fallout Shelter. If there is anybody still in my listenership that came from that forum years ago, you're cool and you're probably old like me. This was a tremendous place for people who were sprite artists. It was a thing back then where literally, if you were on that forum, you probably had not only a sprite of whatever your, original character or sona of yourself was, whatever way you want to put it, but you probably had a sprite comic of some kind. Everybody had one. Everybody. It was like an epidemic of pixels. So there were, I mean, God, just too many people to name. If you go to any ending credits of any episode of TTA, if you go back and you find the Google Drive, which I'll link in the description of all the TTA episodes, and you see the people that I credited for. In fact, that was also back, believe it or not, still a tradition to this day with every incarnation of Tome. All the background characters were submitted by, I wouldn't say fans, because at the very beginning there were no fans. It was, hey, I need background characters for an animation that I'm doing. Do you guys want your characters to be in the background? Like, give me your sprites, post them here, and I'll throw them in the background somewhere. And I did that. That was the very first time that I ever did that with people, and that wasn't even with fans. It was with just people that wanted to have their characters appear in a cartoon. So, but there were other people that were highly skilled at editing, and a lot of them were also like proper artists in their own right, but there were certain ones that specialized tremendously in sprite animation that were kind enough to help with editing some of the characters into, and there was a joke, an ongoing joke, that a majority of the Tome characters were edited off of the Mega Man Zero version of Zero. I mean, for Christ's sake, Alpha, Zeto, Nylok, Rob Star, we called him back then, Ani Doug, so many of them, they were all just that same base, and we, kind of, not base the Mega Man character, like a base as in the BASE. And I think we took like the head of a character from like the Flame of Rekka fighting game for like the GBA or something like that. And we kind of combined those and made the characters from there, and, gave them all different moves. Thankfully, Zero had such a tremendous amount of animations to draw from that we were able to edit all of those. But it still wasn't an easy task to go in painstakingly frame by frame and do pixel art. There's some people that I think even now think that it's like relatively easy, but it really isn't. Pixel art is a very fine kind of science to get right, because anybody can do pixel art, and you can open up MS Paint and there you go. But to make it look really good, that's in and of itself a tremendous challenge. And so I was lucky that this huge community of people, that I could basically go to and said, hey, can you do this? Here's the character design that I've drawn or whatever. And can you take this sprite sheet and, make it into a sheet of character animations for this TTA character? And they would. So I'm eternally grateful to all of those folks, because there's no way that would have happened. Quite frankly, I wouldn't have been able to do TTA without the help of some of those artists that were kind enough to assist me in doing that. I tried to do some stuff myself, as much as I could, but it wasn't my specialty. I was much more on the filmmaking end of things, because of course I did all the actual editing, and I don't want to say animation, because that's not accurate. It was the editing of taking the characters, much like if you're a fan of Super Mario Brothers Z. I think that I want to say that Alvin Earthworm, Mark Haynes, did some sprite animation and editing himself on the project, but I think that for the most part, like, it was all just lifted straight from stuff that had been edited by other people, and which I think that some people like those kind of versions of the Axum Rangers with like the Mega Man Battle Network character bodies and that sort of thing. I think that those might have been done by somebody else, or maybe Mark did those himself. I can't quite remember. But there were all sorts of things like that. And that's how sprite animation series like that, of which there were an abundance of those on Newgrounds when I was kind of getting into that community as well. All sorts of stuff like that. So that's how that was able to work. And like I said, if it wasn't for the help that I received from all those artists on the Fallout Shelter, and probably a couple other sites that I went to, there were a few other forums and communities that I was involved with, that wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been able to do my very first long form animated project of any kind. And the Tome that today, whether it be the series or the RPG, that wouldn't have existed without TTA kind of being the precursor to it. So that's a tremendous first step into my collaboration with lots and lots of other people. The next major step after that, actually a pair of them that kind of seep into each other, would be my collaborating with voice actors both amateur and professional, and then working with other animators very shortly after that. So one person that I would love to give credit to in particular is a individual that went by Max Mao. And they were the creator of a web series, a pretty long-running web series on Newgrounds called Shin, Xin, Shin. Those of you who may or may not have heard of it, it was an animated kind of anime-esque dramatic series, one of the very rare ones that was like that on Newgrounds. And it was actually, in the cast of which was comprised of a whole bunch of folks, many of which are now working professional voiceover actors. That some of which that might have been their very first, experience in voicing for an animated project. So the reason I bring this up is because during the production of TTA, the majority of the voice cast were basically people on that forum, the Fallout Shelter, with microphones. It was literally like, do you have a microphone? Does your voice sound cool? Can you say these, couple lines or whatever? Like, cool, you're hired. It was not a real casting process. Like I picked the people that I felt would be appropriate for the characters, but for the majority of them, and myself included at the time, we were not actors, right? There was a very small handful of people that I had met through the creator of Shin, Max Mao, because I had seen the series and I was like, wow, the quality of voice acting in particular in this is so much better than most of the other stuff that I was watching on Newgrounds, because, usually back then it was, the animators themselves doing the voices and maybe, their friends or their family members voicing somebody else or whatever. It was not, some kind of high-end production. And there were some people that had some talent already, obviously guys like Aaron and Hans van Harken and Josh Tomar and Happy Harry, guys like the Super Flash brothers, there were exceptions certainly, but that was the majority of how it worked. And then, thanks to Max Mao, I met two people in particular who are still lovely friends and working professionals that I've worked on. Almost every project that I've ever done with them was Kira Buckland and Edwin Tiang, who, I'm sure all of you guys listening know their work from countless projects at this point, not even counting the stuff that I've produced, of course. And I worked with both of them over the course of TV Tome Adventures. And then by the time that I got to my next major project, which was the Parody Rangers series, as well as the Parody Rangers movie, that was when I had realized, okay, this is a different kind of setup. I am making a full-fledged actual comedy cartoon where part of the comedy is down to the voice performances. And so I determined, based on mostly people that I had worked with on TTA and then a couple other new folks that I hadn't worked with yet at the time, is I wanted to work with the folks that I knew for sure were really, really funny and understood what it took to, not even if they were necessarily, great experienced actors or whatever, but just knowing that they understood what made a funny cartoon and et cetera. Even if they were doing a very shallow kind of character voice or even just, their own kind of natural voice or whatever, just anything like that. People that I knew were reliable, that would do a good job with their performances. And so guys like Edwin, guys like Crisito, Josh Tomar, a lot of those folks that were kind of the upper echelon of the people that I had worked with up until that point. I made sure to give them major characters because they had proven themselves to me from not only the work that I had done with them, but their own work that they had been doing themselves or stuff that they had been working on with other people. And I realized, okay, yeah, these are the folks that I know that I could depend on to give me, the best product that I need for the end of this. And by the way, I should mention, everything I've talked about up until around this point, this stuff was all before there was any money involved. Literally back then, we didn't have budgets. I mean, a lot of us, we were kids too. We didn't have money to be spending on other people to help us. This really was a time when, and I had done some work for other people, some art and some voices and stuff for a couple other people as well. We all did this stuff for each other for free back then, because it was literally just, we're making stuff and maybe at best what we were chasing was success in terms of popularity. It wasn't until the first Parody Rangers that I did, which won I think it was a monthly award for on Newgrounds. It was the first thing I ever made that got on the front page. I'd won a couple maybe weekly awards with a few TTA episodes here and there, but for the most part, it was Parody Rangers that kind of put me on the map in terms of my presence on Newgrounds. That was what made people know who I was at first, like at all. And then shortly after that, by around 2007 or 8, I think it was, that was when I decided to go ahead and I've talked about this before, but the Nintendo collabs, NIN, the number 10. That was originally intended to be a solo project that I would have animated myself. And as soon as I started on it, I was like, by now I've met other animators, and I was going to college by that time where I was, literally surrounded by other people who were animation folks. And guys like Zach Bellissimo and Michael Ruaco, who were the same age as me, same year as me in SVA at the time, School of Visual Arts in New York City, and a few other folks that I had met from Newgrounds. So by that time, I was like, I not only do I have all these voice actors and people that I can work with, that I've already had experiences with from Parody Rangers and TTA and a couple other little things here and there, but that was, I had, in addition to that, a whole bunch of other artists that I could work with. So it wasn't just me doing everything. And admittedly, part of it was out of just the laziness of, I remember starting to animate on the opening Mario segment that eventually was done by Zach Bellissimo, now of Long Hunt Gulch fame. And he works on like Victor and Valentino and some stuff. I remember working on that myself at the time. And then I was like, I don't know if I really want to do every single one of these segments entirely on my own. This was after I had done the Mario RPG music video, which that was something that I was fully enthused to do all on my own. And I was doing that back with a mouse at the time. I think that by the time the first Nintendo collab had happened, I did have a tablet. So it was, I was able to do, traditional real frame by frame animation. But it kind of hit me. So part of it was motivated a little bit by laziness, but it was also the excitement of like, I'd grown up with seeing other animation collabs on Newgrounds. Like there was back when the Matrix movie trilogy was very popular. There was a Matrix collab. Obviously there were lots of other ones later on. There was a Metal Gear one and a Smash one and Street Fighter, all sorts of stuff like that. And I had taken part in a couple of those, years later, but this was a different kind of setup. And the interesting thing was I also basically had to serve as a director. That's something else that's worth talking about, is in terms of literally collaborating with people. It wasn't until the first Nintendo collab and the Parody Rangers movie that I started voice directing, because I realized that I was going to have the easiest time getting to get the best product that I needed by working directly with the people that I wanted to do things with. So in the case of the voice actors, that was by the time I was using Skype, and I could direct them, via voice chat, which is so funny because now that's become so much of a standard with people recording from home and that sort of thing. That's a very, very common practice, is using stuff like Skype and Zoom and a program called Source Connect, which we use as commonly sort of an industry standard. And so I had started working with all the cast of Parody Rangers and the actors that I was working with on the first Nintendo collab. That was my first foray into voice directing. And I don't know how necessarily good or bad that I was, but certainly I knew what I wanted, and I was able to, and I think that was something that actually helped me to determine, exactly also who were the best people to work with in terms of being able to take direction, having versatility, being a pleasure to work with, having good ideas to bring to the table. Like that was giving me a better sensibility of what was good and bad acting, which I was also studying, on the side for my own interest, just because I was very passionate about voiceover, as I'm sure many of you know. And then that eventually led to me doing that professionally too, both directing and acting. And then with the animation side of things, a lot of it was what I did with the Nintendo collabs was I would have the audio cut together for, I had the voices recorded already, and I would cut the audio together in like separately in an audio editing program. Like I think I had Adobe Audition by that time, or I would be giving them like an individual Flash file with their segment in it, and it would have all the audio in there. And they would have the timing of that to go off of. And sometimes they would move some things around and take some liberties. There were some animators that kind of went off the rails with their own stuff and went totally different directions with the Pokemon Snap thing, which apparently corrupted an entire generation of people, as I'm always reminded of. That was a prime example of Richie Zerbs just went off the rails with that one. And then also the the Metroid one with Samus kind of walking through a little area and just shooting people left and right. That was by Flux, Dorn Matthews, who went ahead and just had fun with it and just completely did a whole separate thing that I was not planning on at all. Like, actually, it's funny because I remember the actor that played Samus at the time recorded all this other stuff, and the only remnant of it that they used was the growling sound effect when Ridley pops out, self-destruct activated, happy birthday, Samus. So, remnants of that. But for the most part, the animators just kind of took what I gave them and they just animated straight to that. And I gave them, sort of written directions. I didn't do any kind of storyboarding or any kind of visual cues to work off of or anything. And they just, went for it and went nuts and had fun with it. And what you saw was what we got with those 3 collabs that we did over the next 2 or 3 years, I think. Maybe, yeah. I think the last one that we finished was in 2010. Yes, yeah, 2010, I believe. So we did them for about 2 or 3 years. And that was a hoot. And that taught me a lot about project management, kind of unintentionally, because I was thinking about just, I guess directing everything and just giving people what they needed. And that was one thing. That was one sort of philosophy that I had, is that my whole mentality with hiring other people, especially if it was other artists, is I wanted to make their lives as easy and simple and straightforward as possible. I didn't realize that that's what I was trying to go for, and therefore I probably wasn't very good at doing that in the early days. But with each successive collab, from Nintendo to Super Nintendo to Nintendo to the 64th power, I was able to clearly indicate that more and more, and make the, because we added some animators and some left and some came back on, and there were different ones and some that stayed consistent throughout all 3, and et cetera. And that made it even an easier process, especially because even now, when people do those kind of reanimation collabs where every shot is a different artist, that requires a ton of coordination. And of course, the not so fun thing of, especially when there's not a lot of money involved or no money involved, when you have to hound people about getting things done, because if you want to set a deadline. In the case of the Nintendo collabs, that was also, I mentioned before, there was no money involved until I started winning some of the monthly prizes from the Parody Rangers episodes and movies, and then eventually having ad revenue on when I had an AdSense account and we would, get paid stuff. But the Parody Rangers movie and all 3 of the Nintendo collabs, as well as actually the first 4 episodes of the Tome web series, the 2011 series, those were sponsored by Newgrounds, by the actual company behind the website. They gave us a small budget of, I think it was a few $1,000s, which, not a ton of money, but it was a little something for me to split between, and especially in the case of the Nintendo collabs where it was literally other animators. I basically, what I did was I paid everybody a certain amount based off of the number of segments that they did, because of course it was kind of Robot Chicken style, the different sort of vignettes and things like that. And then usually I would pay Richie Zerbs, who was the programmer for the menus of all 3 of the Nintendo collabs. I'd pay him a little bit extra for the programming and everything. I think I tried to throw a little bit to some of the people that had also come up with some of the jokes. I remember particularly because I had screwed up a little bit on the credits, which because that's very important to me, is especially compensating people for the amount of work that they've done and crediting every single person for what they've done. Unless, stated otherwise. And I had screwed up because, back in those days when we had all come up with jokes, that was something else. It's for instance, Chris Zito and I, we would, joke a lot with each other about different ideas for things. And some of the ideas for the collab pieces, or some of even just little one-off jokes or whatever, were from him and I joking around, or a joke that he would have made. And I tried with each collab successively to be better and better and better about crediting absolutely everybody for every single little thing, no matter how small it might have been. I always wanted people to be properly credited and hopefully compensated for their work. The voice actors by that time were still not being paid for it, because it was still back to just we're just having fun and we're, helping each other out. And the other reality is we just didn't have the money for it. Realistically, we wouldn't have been able to pay, something fair to any of the actors back then. It was not until the Tome series that I started allocating some of that budget into paying the actors as well for the time, especially because by that point I was working with a lot of people who were working professionally in the business that by that point that they weren't really doing kind of amateur or internet projects anymore. And so, some of them would only do it if they were being paid, at least a little something, it was never back in those days, it was any of this stuff for like any kind of standard rate, which I'm sure people can probably guess because, we just didn't have a lot of money to work with. Like even I say before, we were sponsored with those collabs, but like, $2,000 or $3,000, like as much as like that might sound, oh, that's a lot of money. Like it's not in the grand scheme of things to make a production. It's like nothing, but we made do with what we had. And I tried to make it as fair as possible. I tried, I hope. And I'm sure that there were probably, some people that came from some of those early productions that from a combination of me learning how to be a project manager on the job and just, the money not being great for the project inherently, I can imagine there's probably some people that didn't have the greatest experience in the world on those projects, and that's unfortunate. And tried to take care of people as much as I could, which also comes back to the whole same thing of the mentality that I've kept of I've never had like a true big crazy incredible budget for anything that I've produced myself. Like not even the Tome game, to skip ahead a bit, like doing the Tome RPG, like the money that we made off the Kickstarter, again, it might seem like it was a lot. It was not for a production of the scope that we were doing, but we made do. And again, I tried to make everybody who I worked with, I tried to make their lives as easy as possible, give them very clear direction and tasks of what they needed to do. And, they understood this is how much it's going to be in terms of your workload. This is how much it's going to be in terms of your compensation. That was what I tried my absolute best in doing. And so moving off of the project management lessons that I learned from the Nintendo collabs, I then, by the time that I was finishing my thesis film, which that was more of kind of the same. That was, working with actors, working with, I think I did work with a couple people that were helping with coloring and maybe some cleanup stuff a little bit. So that was actually a bit of a new process. The animation itself, like for the most part, was myself, but I had a little bit of assistant work on it. And then I worked with an original musician for the first time on my old thesis film for Balancing Act, which was my cousin, Luciana Costa. So the Balancing Act film was kind of a connecting piece between everything from the Nintendo collabs, all the stuff I'd learned in my experience doing those three, and then eventually leading into the beginning of the Tome 2011 web series. There were a couple new little things like that I had to, fully understand. And all the while, by the way, I'd mentioned very briefly, I learned a little bit about audio editing and sound effects design and, comedic timing with how the audio stuff kind of fit together and everything. But all that stuff culminated into what eventually was the Tome 2011 series. So that was a much bigger production and scale from anything that I had done, even though it was a case where, once again, I was doing the majority of the work at the end of the day. I was doing, all the animation, most of the art assets and everything. The big things that I had much more help with were background art, just any kind of environment art, a lot of which was recyclable assets that I could use from episode to episode, and especially original music. So this was back when I had met, and I had known some of the folks like Fuli, Terrence Lipinski, and Helios, and a couple other folks that had went on to do stuff throughout the entire show. And then eventually some of them had also worked on a bit of work for the video game as well, the Tome RPG. They were tremendously reliable for doing background art, because getting background artists that are not only good, but consistent and reliable, that is a tough thing to find for when you can't do it yourself. Like, it's a big task because it's a very, very particular skill, and you have to find people that are genuinely passionate about it and therefore genuinely good at it, because it's a very specific kind of skill that, unfortunately, even to this day, I've never been great at. And I really should get better at it. Like, I don't know how I'm going to exactly set it up for when I do the Balancing Act feature film, hopefully down the line. But yeah, I was very lucky to have those folks. And then in addition, another kind of fortuitous thing was I had guys like Wes Cadgett, who did the music for the Tome 2011 series. It was, and I'm, again, hardcore fans know this already, but it was good timing that he had composed a bunch of music for an RPG Maker project that he was doing on his own that never kind of really happened, never saw the light of day. And he had all this stuff left over for various themes he had composed, and I said, hey, could I buy this big library of music and, you know, use this for my show? And then could I commission you to do new music for the series going down the line? And so directing and collaborating with background artists and musicians, and of course later on guys like Yoav and some of the other people, Zero Reynolds and other various folks that I brought on, Stephen Kelly, to do other guest pieces of music and everything. Directing background artists and musicians was a very interesting experience that I'd like to hope that I took well to. With the backgrounds, and actually what they both shared in common in terms of me being able to, again, make their lives as easy as possible, was providing them reference. Like in terms of backgrounds, like say, if I would even do like kind of maybe a basic bitch looking kind of mock-up of what I wanted. Like I would do a very crude version of the drawing, which, because I had the ability to at least somewhat illustrate that, and they could go from there. Or if I had like other pre-existing background assets from other video games, and I could say something like this, but maybe this color, or, that kind of thing. I remember for Lavendera, just like the kind of purple shooting star summit area from Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, that's the background that I used for TTA. That was kind of a simple, through line that I could use for directing, the folks to do that. And then for the music, so like, there's a funny story that we've told on some of the commentaries previously, like when Wes and I were, when we were doing, what's it called? He had composed the title screen theme for his RPG Maker project, which eventually became Battle On, but it was a straight loop. It didn't have an ending. So to illustrate what I needed for him, I literally recorded a clip of myself going da 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 as the ending bit to it. And he said, "Oh, okay, I get it." And that would be the way that he would end the loop, and then of course we had the vocals put over it and yada yada, and it became Battle On shortly after that. So that was the whole sort of setup and everything. But yeah, and then also even same kind of thing like with the Demon Alpha, kind of the creepy sort of forbidden power theme. He had already composed the track Awaken the Beast, which was used for when Demon Alpha transforms for the first time. And I basically had him reverse engineer that. I think I provided like Mephilis's Whisper, which was like a background cutscene track from Sonic 06 of all things, of like, this creepy kind of ethereal, the music slowly creeping in, and then it kind of amps up into something terrifying, like as if he's, in the middle of transforming. I think I also had Demon Inuyasha's theme from the OST of that show as another reference as well. That might have been kind of what I was going for at the time. In fact, I think I had even literally used that in TTA too. So, again, an easy through line. And I guess worth mentioning, and this is, related to the voice acting, casting and everything again, but a lot of people are always surprised about like the people that I got in the cast of Tome 2011, and I guess also the RPG as well. But by that time, I had been doing a little bit of professional voiceover work, and I had gotten to know a lot more people in the business that, had been doing things way longer than I had been. And the 2011 cast was, still a pretty decent mix of newcomer people, and actually the intention at the time, because the first 4 episodes were sponsored by Newgrounds, is I wanted to have a lot more Newgrounds people in the cast that were other, animators and creators and voices and things. But there were a lot of them that just weren't available to do anything on it because they were really busy at the time and they were, doing different things. But I had a few in there, which was cool. And that was actually kind of because just to address that, it really came down to everybody that I got, even like, the really big people, guys like Yuri Lowenthal and Mona Marshall and John St. John, etc., Kyle Hebert, Michelle Knotts. Todd Haberkorn. I asked them and they said yes. It was as straightforward as that. And some of them were required a little bit more, chasing down than others in terms of like, oh, who do I have to go through? Do I need to go through an agent? Is there somebody that I know that knows them personally or whatever? Even relevant to the Mega Man thing recently, getting Andrew Francis was in thanks to Trevor Duvall, who is the voice of Dr. Regal and Mr. Match in Mega Man NT Warrior, and he knew Andrew personally when they worked on Mega Man and plenty of other stuff back in the day. So it was all through. Ultimately, it came down to me reaching out to them through whatever way that I could, with help or otherwise, and asking them. And then generally everybody said yes, which was awesome. And I'm very grateful for it. And actually, more so part of what came from that was I had to learn really how to market because, at the time I was coming off of being known predominantly as like, a video game parody guy. Stuff like Brawl Taunts and, the Mario RPG music videos and all that kind of, all those things. And so I had to really, if I wanted to get this thing off the ground and have it be successful at all, is I had to market it any way that I could. So the fact that it was video game related and it had, some of these guys that were internet personalities and, popular voice actors at the time and, had decent followings that I could, market as part of like hey, this episode is featuring, this guest voice from this thing or whatever. And that was kind of part of what motivated some of the casting, not all, but some of the casting decisions in terms of like, helping to get the show out there. And that was, that in and of itself was collaborative because some of those people would be, kind enough to help cross promote at the same time. That also came into play with the cast of the Tome RPG too, was, having people that, were willing to like, throw a tweet or stream the game or whatever, any of those kind of things. That was motivating, again, some of the casting decisions in terms of, who could I depend on that would be cool with helping me out in that sort of way. Because, when you want to get your stuff out there in a sea of content, that is something that helps, is like having people involved that can help boost it up. Little Karibo, who voiced Nihilok, of course, in the 2011 series. And before that, we had collaborated together on a lot of stuff for Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged. I had done voices and animation and art and things like that. I owe him so much, I think that especially in the late 2000s to late to early 2010s. It is tremendously because of my involvement with him that I, became a lot more known than I was. He was a huge boost in my notoriety on the internet at the time, thanks to a lot of the stuff that we got to work on together, especially more so for the stuff that I did for him, rather than what he did for me. But I'm very grateful because, obviously Nihilok went on to be a huge, beloved character as well. So that was all a big factor in terms of like, what led me on a path of success was also the people that I was, lucky enough to be associated with and get to collaborate with and et cetera. And then again, like even when I eventually did the game, just on the note of the casting, the people that were in the cast that were willing to help marketing it in all those ways that I mentioned, like that's the game wouldn't have had any success, I think, without that, that element of it. So, and I guess also on kind of the final note too, and this was one of the biggest undertakings, was doing the game itself. After I'd finished the show and took a break and did some training and learning and various other projects and doing more voiceover, was I had gotten to involve myself a lot more in the video game development world, doing some freelance stuff for various places and doing writing and casting and voicing and for various indie productions and some professional productions by that point. And on another indie game project that was kickstarted and sadly did not end up being finished, I met Michael Prinky and Nathan Lindley and Scott Gowan from that team. They had all eventually left the project, for various reasons. And I was at kind of a crossroads on what I wanted to do next in terms of a major, project and everything. And so finally I had approached them, the three of them, about, hey, let's team up and let's do the Tome game. And what was great was my experience working with them on somebody else's project, collaborating. We were all collaborating on one thing, And they saw through that project the initiative that I would take and the effort that I was putting in, on my part. On that project, I was doing a combination of some animation, some level construction, not design, more so construction, and writing. I ended up writing the majority of the script for the game. I was doing all the casting, and we never got around to doing the actual recording of the actors, but I was doing a whole bunch of stuff, and even eventually kind of taking the initiative on setting up the meetings for the project at the time, so that we would stay coordinated as much as possible, at least once a week or a couple times a week or whatever. And so they saw that initiative and that effort that I put in, and that was something that actually led them, and I combined with also my previous work that I had done up until that point, that made them confident. Michael Scott and Nathan were all confident enough to continue, or not to continue, but to work with me on my own thing in the first place. And then, from there, of course, a lot of people know we did the demo or the prototype demo, eventually launched the Kickstarter in 2017. We got the funding. And then, for 4 years, we worked together, day by day, as much as humanly possible. And we delivered the finished product in 2021. So it's crazy. It's already been about a year and a half since we released the game now. And I'm so proud again. And at the interim, I think this is an even better note to go out on, but I would say that to a certain extent, I feel like I've collaborated with all of you guys out there listening, because like I'd mentioned, TTA was my very, very, very first kind of major big scope project that I ever did. And right from the get-go, I had even if it wasn't a fan base, it was a potential viewership. The fact that I have been, I've been able to offer this kind of thing where, often a common thing with a lot of this stuff is, oh, you get to be a background character or something to that nature in the project, usually with a tome thing. I would like to do such a thing for a balancing act as well in the future. But, even down to when I started doing Kirblogs, and I was taking Kirblog topic suggestions from the comments and stuff. I've been very fortunate enough to have a really good relationship with even just my YouTube comments. I went from Newgrounds where often Newgrounds reviews were very laced with a lot of cynicism and aggression and just, general kind of misery. And it wasn't a great experience doing that. But then, when it came to YouTube comments, which I know are often considered like the bane of people's existence, but no, people were very nice with their feedback. I think once in a while I'd get like an asshole or two, but for the most part, it was really positive and helpful, and being able to talk about different things and take different requests for stuff. Thanks to people's feedback and again, feeding their own viewership and now patronage even, and all of your support over the last, 15, 20 odd years I've been doing this stuff, whatever at this point, or close to 20, I don't even know. I do feel to a different kind of extent, in a different kind of way, I've been collaborating with all of you on my projects. And I would like to continue to do that. Even now, where I'm trying to stay on top of my life financially and, having these opportunities for, hey, I'll draw you a personalized commission and doing these by request Kirblog topics for my Patreon supporters. I'm not just saying that as a plug. I genuinely mean that. Even, this kind of give and take relationship where it's a nice collaboration that I've continued to consistently do for, pretty much my whole career of doing creative productions. And I'm excited about the prospect of, in other different kind of ways, working with more cool people in the future on the stuff that I want to do down the line, So I think it's important to, it's one thing when no man is a mountain or no man is an ocean. I don't know what the saying is, but I think that there are people that are extremely versatile and talented that can do things entirely on their own. And I think that there is validity and fun to that. Cause I've been having so much fun with TikToks lately, and that's just entirely 100% me on my own doing something. And even then, Wes has given me a lot of help with video editing, accessibility and various things like that. And a lot of it still is coming down to like things that I've learned from other people, and the content usually is in relation to stuff that I've gotten to collaborate with other people on, whether it's voice acting or my own productions or whatever, you know. So even then, there's still an element of like I'm helped out by other people, you know what I mean? And I think that that's great. I really think that the fact that like all of this stuff is feeding into, I love to work with other people, and I'm never afraid to ask for help. I've never been afraid to ask for help ever in my whole life. And the help that everyone has given me over, you know, my whole lifetime is something that I can never, ever stop being grateful for, no matter what. And I hope that I've utilized it well, so that I've been able to, you know, make a positive impact on people's lives with the stuff that I make and everything. You know, so yeah, well, that's going to wrap this up. And I hope this was informative and fun and educational. And I hope that this answered your question, Discellaneous. So then thank you for being the first of my Patreon suggested Kirblog topics. So on that note, in the comments below, do you have any stories of your own to tell about collaborating with others on your own projects? People that you'd love to collaborate with in the future, you know, that you dream about, that, you know, maybe you might be able to someday. You know, were there any particular projects that I mentioned or maybe didn't mention that are big favorites of yours that involved particular people that I got to work with? Let me know. And if you're interested in suggesting future Kirblog topics, please check out patreon.com/Kirbifer. If you become a $3 a month patron, then you can suggest Kirblog topics once a month, of which I will pick the winner on the 15th of every month and have them done before the end of the month. So this is our very first one. Thank you to everybody on my Patreon who suggested topics, and there will be obviously future opportunities for other ones. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I'll be getting back to streaming more of Mega Man Battle Network, of course, as we continue on. So I will catch you all later, and take care of yourselves. Fare thee well.